Hi everyone, welcome to a tactics video. This time we're going to compare the Astra Militarum Hellhound to the Leman Russ Punisher tank. I got this idea from a previous video I did where I managed to go 3-0 at an RT where I used the Leman Russ Punisher Gatling cannon tank as opposed to a Hellhound. And from some of the comments it was a good idea to sort of look at the two units side by side and work out, is the Punisher an alternative to the Hellhound? It's a bit of a fun video looking at that. So just like my previous videos, I'm going to focus more on the analytical side, but let's kick off firstly with what I use the Hellhound for, and also then what I'm looking to do with the Punisher. So from a unit point of view, how I personally use either the Hellhound or the Leman Russ Punisher is an early game skirmish piece that can reliably destroy infantry. So in most matchups, in turns 1 and 2 in the competitive tournament scene, or competitive games with your friends, typically the first 2 turns are pretty quiet. As you're sort of basically establishing your movement, you're getting your units all set up for the big sort of go turns of 3 and 4, and hopefully you're still alive in turn 5. And typically speaking, in those turns, it's typically infantry that skirmish. Of course, if you play knights, you'll be skirmishing with other knights, mini knights, but broadly speaking, you basically, playing that early couple of turns basically against infantry. So I want a unit that can easily kill them reliably, and that's where the Hellhound with its flamer cannon or chem cannon, and the Punisher with a Gatling cannon and flamers can probably do that quite easily. You want the unit to be cheap enough that it doesn't hurt when it dies. Now, at 125 points for the Hellhound, 150 points for the Punisher, it's not exactly cheap, but it's not like you're wasting a Rogue or Dawn, bad example. But of course, you need to balance, as I said here, something that can basically reliably kill infantry, and that comes at a cost, of course. So another example would be, a very different example, Death Corps Engineers. They can reliably kill infantry with their mortal wounds, but obviously it's 70 points for 5 very squishy bodies, so it's a real trade-off there, for example. Then obviously with these two models I'm talking about, they are tough enough the opponent has to commit something to killing it. Obviously both of them have got a 2-up save. We'll look at the core stats in a second, and they're both very, very rugged units which can take a lot of damage. Your opponent has to commit something pretty serious to get rid of that. I mean, that's a key thing for me, is that, again, if you chucked out some engineers, for example, they're super squishy, they've got a 4-up save, they're 1 wound each at T3, they can die quite easily with some bolters, for example, but would bolters do anything to a Hellhound or Punisher? And the answer is no, not really. I then basically view this unit, largely speaking, as it can operate independently of orders and also independently of needing support from other units just to keep it alive. So again, 5 Death Corps Engineers probably need orders to move. And likewise, you probably want to give them other units to keep them alive, in the sense that you don't want them just sat there by themselves, because your opponent can then think that unit's by itself, I can go after and easily kill it without any consequence to me losing a unit in response. However, with a Leman Russ battle tank and a Hellhound, as said, the opponent has to commit something serious to them, and therefore they can basically be sat by themselves, acting independently of orders and also from a wider supporting point of view. And I want a unit that can kill off melee units when tagged, and obviously flamers are the perfect way to answer that problem, or non-blast weapons, because obviously once you get in combat, your blast weapons can't do anything, and then obviously if you get in combat with Death Corps Engineers, they're pretty much going to die against anything. So that's how I broadly view the Hellhound, aka the Punisher, let's call it in this example, and that's what I want the unit to do. So you may use the Hellhound or Punisher in a different way to me, and that's obviously completely fine. That's how you play the game, but I typically use the Hellhound, aka the Punisher, let's call it, in this type of sense. And if you use it differently, please tell me, because I'd love to hear how you approach using this super cool unit. So let's then look at the core stats quite quickly. So here, let me just scroll a bit, get a bit closer to make it nice and big. Right, so I've got basically the stats laid out to the Hellhound and the Leman Russ Punisher. And the easy thing for this comparison is that majority of their statistics or abilities or movement, whatever we call it, is the same. So a 10-inch move, a 2-up save, leadership 7, and OC 3. So OC 3 is quite a good OC. It's enough that if your opponent hasn't got battle line on the objective, you can actually contest, obviously, only against 3 models, but OC 3 is better than OC 2. Obviously, it's not OC 5, but it's OC 3. And then the difference obviously comes in the toughness and the wounds. So from my experience, toughness 10 to 11 isn't that much of a big upgrade. Again, if you went from toughness 10 to 12, that is when it's a big upgrade, in the sense that, say, las cannons are wounding on 4s, dark lanterns are wounding on 4s, And I can't actually think of many strength 10 weapons, and if you can, please tell me. And likewise, when you think of like the weaker weapons, so toughness 5, a strength 5 into toughness 10, and toughness 11 obviously is a 6 up, so a 6 up to wound. And then even a strength 6 is wounding both of these on a 5, if that makes sense. And likewise, if we're talking about a toughness 12, that's where it makes a difference. 11 to 12, strength 6 weapons are wounding on 5s into an 11, and then 6s into 12. But in this example, I actually can't think of many weapons that are at toughness at strength 10, for example, where basically the actual extra toughness does anything. And if you know, please tell me, because I can't think of any other examples. Now, what does make a difference is very clear, is the wounds. So you go from 11 to 13. Now, again, I mean, I'm sure you have if you've played Guard for a while. It's weird how often a rust gets left on one wound. It's quite glorious to watch, actually, when you basically, your opponent puts in loads of Dakar, and then suddenly, maybe they're all 2 damage or 3 damage, and you do a heap of saves, and you take 4 3 damage, or let's say 6 2 damage left on that one wound. So that extra wound, the 13, is oddly very reliable. Now, that math obviously also applies to a degree to the Hellhound, but from my experience, this extra 2 wounds keeps this model alive a lot longer than you would think. Obviously, a 2-up save is fantastic. A 2-up save in cover is essentially a 1-up save, so even against, say, a Las Cannon or Dark Lancer saving on 4s, and then I do, as I said, find the extra two wounds is a huge sort of, it feels really incremental if you want to get all technical and fancy. Now, one way to always think about this, which can help, is the points per wound. This is simply the points you're paying divided by the wounds. So in this case, you're paying exactly 12.5 versus for the Punisher 13.6. So you are basically paying a bit of a premium from a points per wound point of view, and that's obviously in account for the fact it's a tougher model, a fact for it's got more weapons, and you can see here the Hellhound's got a turret weapon, it's got a front weapon, it's got a hunter-killer missile, but the Leman Russ Punisher has got a turret weapon, it's got a front weapon, 2 side-sponsored weapons, heavy stubber, and a hunter-killer missile. So if we just simply say this is 4 weapons, well, let's call it 2 serious weapons, 1 throw weapon, you've got 2 serious weapons, versus here you've got essentially 4 serious weapons. So you're getting probably double the amount of serious Dakar, and then of course you've got a stubber, and they've both got a hunter-killer missile. So that point premium is basically getting you extra toughness, cool, but then you get more Dakar, which is probably where the points per wound cost comes from. Now, the crucial thing always to speak about is then their ability. So the Hellhound, as you all know, has got basically flushed them out, where basically after it's hit something with any of its weapons, so it could be the turret weapon or the front weapon, which could be a multi-melter or a flamer, anything else that gets shot at hasn't got the benefit of cover. So stripping cover is very powerful. And unlike a lot of other armies, this basically affects everything in your army. Yeah, so if you strip cover on a unit, everything else that shoots at it, and what's interesting here actually is it doesn't say Astra Militarum, it just says it doesn't have the benefit of cover. So if you're playing allied units, say Knights or maybe Imperial agents, that means they're shooting the target without the benefit of cover. So that's really powerful. And this obviously is probably the key decision point on a Hellhound versus the Punisher, is the ability that you basically strip cover. My cat's coming in from a night out chasing rats and fighting. So let me let him out. There we go, Max, bye-bye. Now the Punisher, as you can see there, has got the rule Them down, where basically against non-monsters and vehicles you get dev wounds. So this is obviously very tasty, and this is where it becomes an actual unit to consider versus the Hellhound, because you can actually pick up non-monsters and vehicles quite nicely with dev wounds. And as I said, you get basically loads more shooters here. You get basically 3 extra weapons versus just the 1 extra weapon on the Hellhound. So the key thing, as you can see in my notes here, is that the Hellhound buffs the rest of your army. The Punisher just buffs itself. It just basically kills more stuff by itself. Now, there's obviously a value to this, and I'll get to this in a second, where I think in some detachments this is more value than others. But anyway, so that's basically the points per win is a bit higher, but you're basically getting way more Dakar. You're getting a unit which can buff your wider army, and you're getting a unit that's basically focused on just looking after itself. Yeah, okay. Now let's get on to the weapons, and this is when the Mathammer helps us. So The Hellhound has got two options. My favourite personally is the Chem Cannon. It's 12 range, it's a D6 1, strength 2, AP 2, 2 damage, but crucially it's anti-infantry 2+. Now I typically find, again, I don't want to make it all too mind gamey with your opponent, but when you tell your opponent this profile, they typically flinch, like, ooh, because anti-infantry 2+ is obviously great. It means even against heavy infantry like Custodes, and obviously Orcs, for example, you go from wounding on a 4, a 3 to a 2. So that actually means you're going to be wounding a lot more stuff. That's obviously balanced by the fact when you look at the Inferno Cannon, it's 2d6 extra range, it's 6, 2, 1, where you're basically going to be getting a lot more hits on target because you've got 2d6 versus d6 plus 1. So that's always to think about. Now the Punisher in this example, I am taking just triple flamers and the Gatling cannons. The triple flamers obviously is the same as the flamer on the front of the Hellhound, which I'm assuming you take. 12 inches D6, I'm saying 3D6, 5, 2, 1, as you know. And the Punisher Gatling cannon, crucially, has got a 24-inch range with 20 shots, hitting on fours at 6-0-1 with dev wounds against non-monsters vehicles, as we spoke about. So already you can see the Punisher has got the advantage of range, extra 6 inches on its main weapon. Then the stubber on top has got 36-inch range, cool. And they've both got a hunter-killer missile, so that comes out of the comparison because it's basically the same thing. Now I basically put the Chem Cannon and Inferno Cannon for the comparison because this actually is for me to discover what is better technically from a Mathammer point of view, because I personally love the Chem Cannon. Okay, so then basically my example target is just Space Marines with a toughness 4, 3+ save and 2 wounds, and basically the key thing is the toughness and the save. So I've then basically done some math to basically work it out. And again, if you're better at math than I am, please correct any of the mistakes I've made. I've already spotted one here. Is the average number of shots. So my assumption is that the Chem Cannon, which is 1 dice plus 1, is 4.5, because the average on 1 dice is 3.5. And therefore with 2 dice, you're getting 7 hits from the Inferno Cannon, 2d6, and obviously you can see that given its torrent, they automatically hit you. Now, one thing I'm actually realizing as I go through this is that, interestingly, the Chem Cannon doesn't have ignore cover, but anyway, it doesn't matter. So then basically from those hits, I assume a number of wounds. I've done some Mathammer here, and given the Chem Cannon's wounding all infantry on 2+, it means you're going to be getting a fair few more wounds than in this example, the Chem Cannon, where you get 3, you're wounding on 3s, and likewise the Heavy Flamer. So you can basically see, I basically compared the fail saves. Yeah, cool. You can actually see when you use the Chem Cannon, you get on average 3.7 wounds into a toughness 4, 3+ save unit, which basically means you're probably going to be killing almost 2. And then interestingly, it's only a little bit different with the Inferno Cannon getting 4.3. Now, as I said, actually, interestingly, the Chem Cannon doesn't ignore cover like the Inferno Cannon does, so that is to be factored. But you can broadly actually say the amount of damage they do is pretty much the same. Granted, the Inferno Cannon's got an additional 6 inches, which means if you are looking to strip cover with this unit, that extra range will make a difference. Yeah, so, but interestingly, just for the sake of the Hellhound, and again, it's basically showing to me I should be using the Inferno Cannon, the Chem Cannon, is actually that, technically speaking, the Inferno Cannon gets more successful wounds on account for the fact it's got 2d6 versus d6 plus 1. And of course, this only gets a toughness 4. Right, now the Leman Russ Punisher, I'm assuming it costs 3 dice. It's 10.5 hits, which means 10.5 wounds, which means 7 successful wounds. And given it's AP1, that obviously means your opponent's going to be failing 3.5, which means 3.5 wounds go through. Now the Punisher Gatling Cannon, again, I'm assuming it doesn't get an order. So what I've basically done here is, if it's hitting on 4s, 50% of the time you're hitting, which therefore means you're getting 10 hits, yeah? And the reason why I've got the dev wounds here is on average in 10 dice, 10 successful hits, 1.7 of those roughly would be an actual dev wound, a wound roll of 6. So this basically shows you that, you know, once you carry it through, and I've also factored the heavy stubber, you actually get 7.5 successful wounds through, just simply because you've got loads more dice, yeah? So you've got 3 heavy flamers, you've got the Punisher Gatling cannon with the dev wounds. He's actually said with that extra, all that extra dice going into the pile, and the dev wounds, interestingly from the math I can see here, the Punisher will simply will do more damage. Yeah, because you've got 2 of your flamers versus 1, you've got a main cannon, and then you've got a heavy stubble, which obviously it all adds up. So from this analysis, it actually shows the Punisher will be getting out a load more hits, wounds, and obviously dead models than the Hellhound. Now, as we saw before, you are paying a premium, an extra 25 points, and then if we work at the points per wound incrementality, getting all fancy here and trying to be all like business-like with my analysis, is basically it's a 9% premium. If I can find the percentage sign, it's a 9% premium. But basically you're getting an additional almost double. So if we work this out, oh geez, yeah, it's okay, 76% more wounds going through versus a 9% premium. So actually, if you want to be using the Hellhound just to kill things mostly, and strip cover for you is not that important, if you've got an extra 25 points in your list, the Punisher probably is the way to go. So yes, hopefully this is mathematically stimulating for some of you, certainly for me. As I said, you're paying extra 25 points absolute, an extra 9% from a points per wound cost point of view. And then, as I said, basically from a Mathammer point of view, and if I've screwed this up, please tell me, you there out in the interwebs, but it is showing you pretty much get almost double the amount of wounds going through compared to the Hellhounds, be it the Chem Cannon or the Inferno Cannon. So where does that leave us from a decision point of view? And I'll try to be all fancy, not fancy, but you know, okay, so from a summary point of view, the additional 25 points for the Punisher, you basically double the number of wounds into infantry or non-monsters and vehicles because of the dev wounds on the Punisher. I feel the extra 2 wounds is a break point, but as I said, the toughness 11 versus toughness 10 doesn't actually give you much extra. And again, if you know examples where it does, please tell me. The Punisher has the advantage of 24-inch range, which is an additional 6-inch, however, is a sole unit, not buffing your wider army. Now, where I think the Hellhound has more value is in the combined arms is in non-combined arm detachment, or armies without the Leman Russ Exterminator. The Hellhound has probably got greater value. So what I mean by that is in combined arms, you've got access to fields of fire. And again, I think other detachments now in the Codex you do, and I don't actually know them all that well, but I believe there are other stratagems, but obviously Fields of Fire is a very good stratagem. Just 1 CP, you can give 1 squadron, 1 regiment unit extra AP, and suddenly you've got extra AP buffs. And obviously the Exterminator Leman Russ gives extra AP to everything else as well. So if you're not running the Exterminator, you don't see value in that unit, you don't use it for whatever reason, or you don't play combined arms, that's when I kind of think the Hellhound probably has greater value, because you need something to basically be removing cover. Given in 10th edition of 40k cover is so prevalent, so easy to be in cover with the current rule set. So hopefully this is interesting. I personally will probably stick with the Punisher for now, because in my lists I play combined. I can use Fields of Fire. I've got Ursula Creed to make Fields of Fire for free, and then I do always take an Exterminator Leman Russ. So I typically don't have cover challenges. And then, you know, from my experience again, the extra 2 wounds makes a big difference for me. And I you know, as I said, mine is typically always dead by turn 3. It's never alive beyond that. And if it is, I'm giving my opponent a pretty tough match. But I think there definitely is, you know, the Punisher is a good alternative to the Hellhounds. Of course, as I've said, if you're not playing combined with Fields of Fire stratagem, you're not using Exterminator Leman Russ, the Hellhound has got greater value. And of course, always, if you can't find an additional 25 points in your list, then you just take the Hellhounds, yeah? So if you're just left with 125 points in the list, 130, and you're like, what do I buy? You go, okay, Hellhound. You're not going to go and redesign your wider list just to fit in the Punisher. Cool, so hopefully interesting. Let me know what you think. If I've made any mistakes with the math, please tell me, because I've tried to work this out as precisely as possible. But yes, hopefully interesting to see this analysis. Again, I take a very sort of analytical approach for this type of thing. And hopefully helps you make a decision about which unit you're going to take. And I think they're both cool. Other lore of the Hellhound just basically in a flame bus, cooking dudes alive, using the chem cannon to cook guys from the inside of their armor, and obviously the idea of like the chain cannon of an A10 Warthog, the modern day sort of fighter plane, being shoved onto a tank is freaking awesome. So very cool units, both of them. So yep, so hopefully interesting. And if you enjoyed the video and want to support me, you can do so with a like, comment, or by subscribing, or just watching any of other YouTube videos. I'm a true Astra Militarum variety hub, covering everything from the lore of Astra Militarum, tactics, where I bring a relaxed but competitive approach to 40k, and also painting, assembling, kit bashing videos as well. You can also actually, if you want to support me, buy some channel dice. I had this printed by the fantastic team at Dice Baron in the US. There's some camouflage style dice with my little channel icon on them. So all the details in the link below, description below, and basically you have to get in touch with me via email and I'll send them out to you around the world. So super thanks to my current supporters and Patreons and channel members. So get your bayonet sharp, last gun oiled. Fair from the Emperor strong. Patron platoon, sound off. Tank Commander Glenn. Tank Commander Watchdog Van Etten. Tank Commander Mitchell. Lieutenant Burke Nilsson. Lieutenant Smith. Colour Sergeant DuPont. Sergeants Adal, Scott, the Colonel Merrill, Veteran Gibson, Hall, Lundeen, Guardsman Beard, Coquelin, Easingwood, Hills, Malik, Nitton, Nguyen, Medicae, Rolfe, Tonkin, Conscript England, Evan Gunn, Goodwin, Honorary Members Bolgram King, Syker Smith, Sion Gaylard, Aquilin Nassim.